G'day battlers, and today we're going to be going over the unranked but official Silph Arena Cup for the month of September, and that is going to be the Circus Cup. So if you weren't already aware, Silph was basically doing a Player's Choice Cup for the month of September, so they asked the community to submit their cup suggestions, and then after receiving hundreds of entries, they narrowed it down to 4 finalists, and then we were able to vote on those 4, and the Circus Cup came out on top. So the Circus Cup was constructed by Adiksollo and ObroncaMARYJKI from Poland, I believe. I hope that I'm saying those names right. They consist of Pokemon with at least one typing of Flying, Fighting, Psychic, Poison, and Fire, with all Legendaries, Mythicals, Alolans, and also Altaria banned. So with all that said, all that's left to do is to hit that subscribe button for more Silph content, and yeah, let's get into the meta. So here's my infographic, and the first thing that you might notice is that the flying group down the bottom only has one like faint arrow away from it, and there's no other strong arrows coming away for it, despite Skarmory being number 1 on PvP. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but that certainly doesn't mean that the flyers are useless. But for now, let's start up in the top center with a very straightforward pick, Emolga. So Emolga is kind of a rare Pokemon, and I've seen a lot of people complaining that they don't have one because it hasn't been around for very long. But it's got the Thundershock Discharge combo, which makes it a really quick and spammy dude. And just like in the Flying Cup, which there's also a meta simplified for that, it's taking out the flyers pretty well, both the main flying group in the bottom middle as well as Mantine in the bottom right. So Emolga is then going to be losing to Magcargo down in the bottom left, and Magcargo is going to be running Rock Throw in this cup as well, and then also Emolga is going to be losing to the Confusion users Hypno and Bronzong in the top left, and to the Dark Poisons, Drapion and Skuntank in the top right. So let's start to get a little bit more complicated though, and move on to the Confusion users. So Hypno has a lot of move combos you can pack, you know, it's got a million different moves, but for this cup, PvP is currently recommending Thunder Punch and Shadow Ball. This is basically to have that flying coverage with Thunder Punch while also still packing a heavy nuke of Shadow Ball to hit basically anything else in the cup with. And you know, Bronzong's Bronzong, it's running the same moveset every time, Psyshock, Bulldoze, but they're both beating Magcargo and Emolga as before, and then they're losing to the Dark Poisons, and there's a dotted line from the Confusioners to the Flyers, and that's because the Flyers are all a little bit different. Bronzong generally beats all 4 of the Flyers there, Skarmory, Dragonite, Noctowl, and Pelipper, whereas Hypno is actually slated to lose against Skarmory and Noctowl, although barely, and then also Shadow Dragonite. And I'm going to talk about the Shadow thing later on as well, but for now, basically just know that Bronzong beats Flyers, Hypno beats some Flyers, and then there's also a no line between Mantine, and that is because Mantine is an absolute pest. It's got all sorts of matchups that are dependent on baits, dependent on attack debuffs, dependent on whether it's high-tied. It's just an absolute nightmare to know with certainty how the matchup is going to go. But Hypno is supposed to be beating Mantine just straight Thunder Punch, and Mantine is supposed to beat Bronzong, but I'll talk about how exactly that works when you do get to Mantine. It's not exactly guaranteed. But let's move on to Magcargo for now, who's at least one that we can be pretty sure is going to lose to Mantine. Straight Bubble Beam. I'm struggling to say Bubble Beam. But then Magcargo is going to be losing to the Confusion users up the top, and then also beating Emolga and the other Flyers, except for Pelipper, because Pelipper's got Water Weather Ball. Magcargo doesn't appreciate that. So, and here's another one that doesn't actually have a line, and that is between Magcargo and the Dark Poisons. So Drapion beats Magcargo because it has Aqua Tail, whereas Skuntank loses because it doesn't have Aqua Tail, I guess. But before we dive into the Flyers, let's look at the Dark Poisons back up the top right. Obviously, there's the Magcargo thing, Drapion wins, Skuntank loses, and then as we said before, they're beating Emolga and also the Confusion users. They are generally losing to Mantine, and we'll talk about that in a bit as well. And I have a faint arrow from the Flyers towards the Dark Poisons, and basically that's because Skuntank loses to almost all of them except Pelipper, while Drapion is able to take out wins against Noctowl and Dragonite. So I don't think I actually mentioned Drapion's moveset, but it's going to be running Ice Fang, Aqua Tail, and Crunch in this cup. Ice Fang for that ice coverage again, Aqua Tail, you've got that Magcargo, and then Crunch, you've got Poison, Psychic coverage as well. But yeah, Flyers mostly beating the Dark Poisons, but not completely. Now it's time to getting into the nitty gritty, and that's because it's time to talk about the Flyers. So I've got Skarmory, Dragonite, Pelipper, and Noctowl on here because they're the highest ranked on PvP as an indicator for how the Flyers are going to be doing, what they're going to be working as sort of deal, what their role is a better way to put it. Shadow Dragonite is supposed to be better than the Vanilla Dragonite, but I hope I don't ever have to tell anyone that they have to invest in Shadows because they're just so expensive, and so luckily there is actually a trade-off here for the Vanilla and Shadow. So I think it's best to go through group by group and talk about how the Flyers differ. So again, Magcargo is going to be beating everyone except for Pelipper. It's got that Water Weather Ball. rock and fire typing. It doesn't like it. And then again, up to the confusion users, Bronzong beating everyone. Hypno is losing to Noctowl, Skarmory, and also Shadow Dragonite. But this is where the Shadow Dragonite does lose a point, because the only one of these flyers who beats Emolga is Vanilla Dragonite. So, you know, there you go. You can do something. Straight Dragon Breath damage, no Shadow Defense debuff thing. But again, Skuntank is also going to be losing to all of the flyers except for Pelipper, which I guess is the trade-off for beating Makago. That it loses to Skuntank and beats Makago. Although I probably should have realized that Drapion is also going to be beaten by Skarmory and Pelipper. So I guess that's another thing in Pelipper's corner. So there's certainly some trade-offs between the flyers, but yeah, we'll put a little bit of a pause on Mantine just because it is so painful. Because I think it's important to point out now that we haven't really shown that the flyers are overwhelmingly great in this cup, despite Skarmory being number 1 on PvPoke. And that's kind of because the flyers beat more of the other Pokemon in the meta, so they're beating a lot more of the outer meta picks, like they might be beating the number 20 on PvPoke as opposed to number 5, like Gardevoir or Scrafty or Gengar. So it's not to scoff at. It's a very important thing to have on your team to be able to cover those more spicy picks and make a balanced team. But I think it might mean that with the more PvPoke simulations, the flyers might start to drop off a little bit from the top spots from when I'm recording this. So I'll have that link to PvPoke in the description below if you want to do check that out for yourself. But first we have to talk about Mantine. So oh dear, so Mantine's got Bubble Beam, as we all know, and it's paired up with Bubble and Ice Beam in this cup. So I think we're going to see some matches get timed out this month. So Mantine wins against Makago, straight Bubble Beam, as we said before, and it also beats Drapion in the exact same fashion. But those are the only 2 Pokemon on this graphic that it can straight Bubble Beam. It can go straight Ice Beam on Makago again, as well as Skuntank and Vanilla Dragonite. So that's why we do have that solid line to the Dark Poisons, because it can beat both of those straight charge moves, as well as the solid line to Makago, again, straight either charge move. But then all the other matchups require some amount of finesse with both Bubble Beams and Ice Beams, and, you know, potential for shield decisions, maybe the tide's low. It might just throw everything out of whack. So it's also got some straight losses, like in the case of Emolga, Water Flying, doesn't like it. Hypno, it's got Thunder Punch, and Shadow Dragonite. So Shadow Dragonite, I guess, it's just doing enough Dragon Breath damage, I suppose. But actually, just to throw some examples out there, Skarmory, you need to land an Ice Beam to be able to take out the win, despite it being listed as a really good win for Mantine. Not a really good win, like a good win for Mantine to have. It's not exactly guaranteed. And then Bronzong, which is one we actually mentioned earlier, Mantine needs to land 2 Ice Beams to take out the win. So Mantine is a bit of a risky Pokemon, and I think it'll take a deep level of matchup knowledge to be able to use it at like a really high level. The alternative is you could actually run it as a safe switch, swap it into anything and just Bubble Beam down if you're in a bad mashup. They're likely going to be able to switch into a counter like an Emolga, but at least then you'll be able to throw some Bubble Beams on it before you go down. You might be able to bring something in to farm up the Emolga. I don't know, it might depend on your lineups, and it might be an uphill battle, but it could get you out of there. So maybe Mantine is a great safe switch. We'll just have to wait and see. And with that said, thank you all for watching. This is my Circus Cup Meta Simplified. Don't forget to subscribe for future Silph content, and also if you're feeling like it, leave a like and comment for the YouTube algorithm. And yeah, so this one's a little later than it usually is, but we got there in the end. So thank you to our patrons, Milton58, brajSF negative, and 10 or Newman, Yahwertle, SqeakyNL for supporting the channel, and also thank you to Sadie Poo for the Twitch emote, Red44 Maze for the 5 filtered subs, and Oscarlicious for the sub on Twitch. Sorry, I'm getting another call. I'm gonna have to hang up. Okay, bye.